District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program.
Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
George Clooney and Brad Pitt's new movie, Wolves, is on Apple TV Plus September 27th.
That's where I want you to be now.
So if you want to see George Clooney and Brad Pitt, go to Apple TV Plus.
You got to start the story there.
Or if you want to see Brad Pitt and George Clooney, go to Apple TV Plus.
I am enjoying the show.
And if you want to see their new movie, Wolves,
You can't do it, I'm going to help you out. I can do it, so do it.
definitely go to Apple TV Plus.
Admit it, it's cool. Okay, fine, it was very cool.
Wolves, streaming September 27th on Apple TV Plus. Rated R.
Welcome to District of Conservation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. I hope you all had a lovely weekend. September is heating up in many regards. I've seen many of you go to the field in and out of Virginia for dove hunting. I'm going to be joining in on the fun this weekend to our neighbors to the south in North Carolina for a very cool reporting trip that I will go into detail a little later. I've also just updated my fly fishing tackle, bought some new streamer patterns, some strike indicators, updated my tippet. Those new items should be coming in the mail really soon. Have a potential fly fishing adventure, kind of a backcountry fly fishing adventure here in Virginia, tentatively scheduled for next month, mid-next month. Again, another opportunity I'm going to share here once that materializes. And yes, you did see last Friday that Governor Youngkin appointed me to the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation Board of Trustees to serve a couple-year term. It's a very huge honor to be doing that. It doesn't really conflict with anything I'm doing currently, so it's great. And to step up in this capacity for public service is a very high honor. I will do my job well and help advance a conservative conservationist message that the governor also abides by as well. So you will see more from me doing that. It's a very cool position, volunteer position. Lots of exciting things underway here in season 7. We have no shortage of content. We're going to do some election analysis. And today's guest is perfect for that because we're tying in energy to politics and just this conversation of grid reliability, energy reliability, and moving away from this all of the above jargon we hear politicians on both sides of the aisle talk about. So without further ado, here is my conversation with André Béliveau of the Commonwealth Foundation. Energy should be top of mind for voters ahead of the November election, which is coming really close. I brought on someone I've been starting to work with more outside of my podcast duties, André Béliveau, and he is the senior policy expert at the Commonwealth Foundation. It's a Pennsylvania-centric, policy think tank. We share a lot of commonality, both states, both are Commonwealths, so I may have done that by accident.
That's
there.
right.
André,
we are Commonwealth states.
And we both are very passionate about energy. And I know we're going to start collaborating together more. So I really wanted to bring you on to talk about your guys' new energy platform. I thought that's really important to get out there. And we can go into detail more about that as the podcast progresses. But André, could you introduce yourself and talk about how you got into this policy realm and why energy really makes you excited?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the senior manager of energy policy at the Commonwealth Foundation. So we are a state-based think tank, and we are Pennsylvania's premier free market think tank. I'm based here in Washington, D.C. But I like to say to people, I can get to Harrisburg a lot quicker than some of my colleagues can who come in from Pittsburgh. So I spend a majority of my time thinking about state policy for energy and what we can do to make energy policy even better for Pennsylvanians. But I also think about Pennsylvania as having a national message that we are an energy producing state. So I spent a lot of time working with our national partners, both in the state policy network arena and also some of our other national level think tank partners, championing a national message with Pennsylvania at the tip of the spear. So I focus on state policy, also deal with federal policy and regulation, and then, of course, networking nationally, thinking about energy policy. But I actually came to energy policy from having worked in the North Carolina General Assembly. I lived in Raleigh for several years and found a job down there as a policy advisor working for the North Carolina Senate. And I worked on a transformative bipartisan energy bill in North Carolina that really set the focus for North Carolina's energy future. So I kind of fell into energy policy almost by accident. It's just the member I was working for was a former energy executive before he got elected to office. He was on the Energy and Environment Committee. So I found myself working on that portfolio as a staffer, and then later moved on to the John Locke Foundation, which is a state-based think tank down in North Carolina, where I did government affairs work and some strategic projects, which included energy policy. So got to work on legislation and work on energy policy first as a staffer, and then later in the think tank space with Locke, where I'm still a visiting fellow and still get to do some fun energy policy work in North Carolina before finding myself up in Pennsylvania and working on energy policy there.
Pennsylvania does have relevance in this energy discussion because of the Marcellus Shale, as you know, and listeners know who follow energy policy or have become more familiar, I guess, through my discussion with it with other guests from Pennsylvania and similar reports I've done in Northwest Pennsylvania, seeing fracking. But I think this even goes beyond fracking. Fracking is just a small piece of the pie. It's part of natural gas, LNG, all that type of stuff. But Pennsylvania, I feel like sometimes gets overshadowed by Texas. Of course, all the top energy producing states have been under attack by onerous regulations under Biden-Harris administration. Everyone knows that. But the reason why I think Pennsylvania is taking center stage here, it always does whenever you have a decisive election, but it's because of the amount of jobs. Hundreds of thousands of lives directly and indirectly are supported by work in the natural gas industry and oil and gas in the greater context of things. And so I think that's why your organization and your efforts are really critical, even going into this fall and beyond. But I think hearing from the workers, you and I have met with some of these influential people. You've met with some people I've had the pleasure of interviewing who work in this space. The Stewart family, Tyler Martin. You recently met my colleague, Bronna Howard, who also comes from a natural gas, oil and gas producing family as well. So the implications from Washington or policy decisions handed down from Washington have adversely affected Pennsylvania for sure. Everyone and their mother knows this. But that's why I think compared to Texas, which, yes, gets attacked, of course, like every state does, but because it's politically in people's kind of awareness, Pennsylvania, and you see people taking different positions. You see Vice President Harris saying she's for fracking, but she can't lay out a concise reason as to why. It doesn't seem to me like a change of heart. Mm-hmm. You've gone on media to talk about her different position. I call it a non-awakening, because until she actually goes to the field, to one of these fracking sites, dons a construction hat, meets with these workers, reassures them she's not going to regulate them out of existence, I don't think my skepticism will change. What about yours?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, look, as a conservative, I appreciate when whether my arguments or others who are making these kinds of arguments, when we can convince someone to come to our way of thinking, we should certainly celebrate that. And I love when I can convince someone that my arguments are right and they come around to my way of thinking. And I wish I could believe that that's what's happening with Kamala Harris on her supposed flip-flop on fracking. But really what I've been trying to tell people is that whether that's true or not, whether she has actually changed her position on fracking is kind of irrelevant. What's more important, I think, for me, and when I'm looking at all of this, is what has been the record of the Biden-Harris administration the last 4 years, and what is she celebrating while simultaneously saying that she's changed her view on fracking. And I think just from, we had the debate just the other night, and in the same way where she says that she's always been supportive of fracking, which is of course not true. In the same breath, she's celebrated the Inflation Reduction Act. And this has been one of the worst boondoggles for energy policy that's come out of the Biden-Harris administration. I mean, the IRA has absolutely flooded and poisoned our energy markets. It's changed market signals, which indicate how we should deal with baseload generation and the so-called green energy tax credits that have come from the IRA have been absolutely disastrous, not only for grid reliability and our capacity markets, because it's been flooding those with intermittent, weather-dependent, unreliable energy sources, but it's also inevitably going to raise electric costs. So it not only so you're going to be paying more money for a less reliable grid. So you have the IRA. Obviously, the Biden-Harris administration put forward a pause on our liquefied natural gas, our LNG exports. The Biden-Harris EPA put out a final rule this year, which is a nail in the coffin to the coal and natural gas industry with their, the draconian carbon capture measures, putting forward technology that doesn't even exist, which is essentially an end to the coal industry, and they're trying to prevent the expansion of natural gas. So to me, if she's changed her tune on fracking, that's fine, but you can literally do 1,000 other things or just do the things that they have been doing that is just going to kill the American energy industry. So it's death by 1,000 cuts. I hope she doesn't ban fracking. It's important to Pennsylvania. It's certainly important to American energy independence. I like to tell people Pennsylvania is the keystone state, but we also hold the keystone for American energy security. Pennsylvania is the largest power exporter in the country. We're the second largest exporter of natural gas, second only to Texas. People talk about the Marcellus Shale boom, and we sit in Pennsylvania on the Saudi Arabia of North America. We have the answer to our energy problems, and I just think I'm glad that maybe she's changed her view on fracking, but she's doing everything else to try to end the oil and gas industry in this country and to try to prevent reliable energy in the name of so-called net zero, so-called green energy movements. And I just hope, we'll see what the rhetoric starts to match up with some of the policy proposals.
I think I'll maintain my skepticism, Andre, because we know from all the different announcements, pronouncements, executive orders, she has signed on and co-signed on to net zero. Net zero, as listeners know, and you know this too, of course, it says that you have to get rid of every fossil fuel source. That includes derivatives and practices like fracking. So to me, you can't hold both positions. You either have to have one or the other. It's probably too highbrow for a lot of people who are not into this, strangely like we are. We're knee deep into this policy niche. But you can't reconcile those two. You can't have net zero and then say you're going to catalyze fracking or allow fracking.
That's right. Well, and also the irony of all of this is that you need hydrocarbons. You need the very petroleum products that they want to ban in order to build the solar panels and build the wind turbines.
Exactly.
Those are carbon intensive things to make. So it's ridiculous on its face. It's just an impossible goal to reach. And net zero policies focused on our energy grid are absolutely ridiculous. 80% of the world's energy comes from some form of a hydrocarbon. So unless you're going to have, really radical authoritarian policies in place, and unless we want to see real economic devastation, this is just a fool's errand. And unfortunately, I think the conversation around climate issues and around environmental conservation gets all the energy gets sucked out of the room because it's being held onto by the radical environmental left. And that's a shame because we should be talking about responsible environmental stewardship and responsible environmental conservation. There are certainly things we can do to ensure that we address the issues that are coming from climate or climate related issues or climate change. There are certainly things that we can do to be better stewards of our natural environment, and there's ways to mitigate that through innovation. Everybody wants clean air, clean water. Of course, but perhaps hyper focusing on our energy grid and removing reliable energy sources, things that we need to sustain modern life, things that we need to promote human flourishing and prosperity, maybe getting rid of those things is not a responsible way to deal with environmental stewardship and conservation.
That's what this podcast is all about. And Andre, I do a lot in the conservation space myself, public lands. Since I'm a sportswoman, I'm actively in the field hunting and fishing and hiking and doing all those activities. So you absolutely can have a balance of both. And working in energy gives me a greater insight into that about balance use and stewardship. That's a term I think people like better. Conservation is a better term, but the left hijacks that term, unfortunately. And I worry if VP Harris were to be elevated to president, she could say, okay, I support fracking on the campaign trail. And then she'll do a bait and switch like President Obama did when they basically told coal workers, okay, we're in office now. You guys have to learn to code. My worry is if she were to elevate in her position, she'll tell frackers, you got to learn a code. Sorry, I lied to you. I just don't trust her. Just with her history of how she's voted, what she's done. And then, of course, like you mentioned earlier this year, there were pause on new natural gas, LNG, export terminals. I was in Lithuania recently where my family is from. I saw one of those terminals that accepts LNG from Louisiana, of all places. And we gave them about 2/3 of their supply in 2022. I think it's a little bit less last year. They got more so their supply from Norway and a couple others. We were in the mix as well. But I've seen firsthand like where we do send our LNG. And it's really important. We could be sending more to our allies and, of course, keeping enough for us if we didn't have these wayward policies. But I don't trust her enough, knowing her history, to really have a conversion or change of heart on fracking. That's just me. I'm the pessimist here.
Right. I mean, I don't blame you. Again, the record's clear, right? We can see this, and I'm also not willing to believe it when, like I said, in the same breath you celebrate, the so-called successes of the IRA. That to me is a clear signal of where what she actually intends to do with policy.
It really is, and it's interesting where we're thinking about energy policy. And I know we've talked a lot. We recently got we got lunch recently, caught up and chatted and exchanged ideas. And we'll talk about where we think conservatives should kind of go with respect to framing energy issues towards the end of our recording today. But I want you to talk about the Commonwealth Foundation's energy policy vision. I want to lay out a couple of things, and then you could break it down more concisely for the listeners. So you have a few tenets in this new platform that your organization has released. We've included it separate from this podcast in my organization's energy newsletter. So readers of Clearing the Air at IWF will get to see that as well. But some really easy, comprehensible, agreeable positions. You basically articulate energy is reliable and affordable, common sense management, stewardship to protect the environment. Pennsylvanians are free to innovate and address energy and environmental challenges responsibly. Families, businesses benefit from the Commonwealth's abundance of natural resources, and Pennsylvania leads the way to secure American energy independence and dominance. So talk about some of the guiding principles in your new energy platform, if you can, Andre.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's available online if people want to go to commonwealthfoundation.org. You can go to our energy issue page. It's right there at the top. You can get the pretty PDF that's got all the neat little graphics, and our team did an awesome job. I'm very thankful to be have a great support team at Commonwealth who can do digital, creative, all the things that I don't know how to do. These people help bring it together. We have a great comms team. So please go on the website, take a look at it, and read it for yourself. But what we wanted to achieve here was two things. One, we believe that Pennsylvania should be the tip of the spear of American energy independence and dominance in the global marketplace. So we wanted to make sure that we had a national message. We wanted to practice what we preach. We believe in robust federalism, and we're part of a much broader freedom movement and a network of state-based think tanks and national groups. So we wanted to offer something for everybody, all 50 states, for each state to be able to take some universal guiding principles in energy policy and apply them in their own states, or people who are working at the federal level to apply those. So we have 8 universal guiding principles that should guide energy policy. And these are not Pennsylvania specific. Again, these can be applied anywhere across the country. So we have 8 of those. And then we have 5 specific Pennsylvania calls to action, sort of taking those guiding principles and then putting forward to our Pennsylvania lawmakers what we think the top 5 issues should be that they should address in energy policy. And real quick, just to go for the headers. So we have 8 guiding principles. The first one is we believe in a people-first approach to energy policy. That is to say, of course, we should have market-driven policies that are going to have positive impacts on the environment, and we believe that the market should drive that we don't need overzealous or draconian regulatory mandates to do that. But at the end of the day, human flourishing and prosperity should be the central incentive for guiding our energy future. It should be about people. So that's the first one. The next one, tied into that, is that we should have, as we mentioned before, responsible environmental stewardship and conservation, that we should be focusing on things like ecosystem restoration or forest management, agriculture, rather than some of these radical initiatives that we see that inevitably will result in energy scarcity. So we need to think about responsible environmentalism. That's our second tenet. The next one is 100% energy abundance over net zero. I think that sort of speaks for itself. We think we need more energy, not less, and we know that these net zero policies are actually just taking more energy off of our grids, and we don't believe that. We think we should have 100% energy abundance. We believe that we should have policies that prioritize reliability and affordability. And I think we'll talk about this at the end. There are tons of rhetorical ideas and schemes out there, but at the end of the day, we believe that the priority here should be reliability and affordability in energy, and that's what we want to push policymakers to be going towards. We believe in market-driven solutions, not handouts or subsidies. That should also, I think, speak for itself. We oppose carbon taxes, and we thought it was important to call out carbon taxes specifically and these cap and trade schemes, things we've been dealing with in Pennsylvania, like the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative or other cap and tax schemes that have come up. We believe that these effectively are economy-wide energy taxes. At the federal level, we've seen things like the Prove It Act. We want to have carbon pricing. So we thought it was important to call that out, that a carbon tax fundamentally is a tax on modern life. And we oppose that as an organization. And then finally, we believe in robust federalism, where we think the states should be taking the reins to sort of reel back this ever-expanding federal overreach that we're seeing in energy policy. We mentioned earlier about the EPA. So we believe in robust federalism. And then finally, in a pro-energy regulatory and permitting reform strategy. Energy projects and environmental projects should be thriving in the United States. We know that our nuclear fleet, the build out of that is nowhere near where it should be on scale. We know that our current natural gas infrastructure, our pipeline infrastructure is fully subscribed. And a lot of these things are because of poor regulations and extreme regulations and permitting that is just absolutely ridiculous. We need predictable timelines, some clearly defined metrics for success. There needs to be robust permitting reform. And those are our sort of overarching 8 guiding principles that we put forward. And then we put, again, 5 specific calls to action to our General Assembly in Pennsylvania to call on lawmakers to take those principles into action. And we offer them 5 that we think are the top 5 proposals that they should be working on.
I'd say this is one of the better center-right energy proposals I've seen of late, because we have friends who more so are focused on climate. And I feel like this speaks to me and everything I stand for individually and even in my professional capacity. And I would argue here on the podcast too, what our values are here. It's very reasonable to want this. And it's really funny. We've talked about this at length privately and then through social media discussions. It's ironic to me when you see environmentalists supporting intermittent and even destructive facilities which use quantities more of land than a nuclear facility would, or even a natural gas plant would. And they say, we care for this particular species. We care so richly about the environment. We want clean air and clean water. But they're ushering in through the IRA licensing and granting and greenlighting this type of destructive behavior. And again, if people want to choose solar and wind on a not so utility scale,
that's right.
That's great. I think that's where it could be appropriate. But the way that they've been doing solar and wind, this utility scale solar and wind, it's not working. And you see a lot of resistance out west. We see quite a bit here on the eastern board too, in Pennsylvania, Virginia. They're very skeptical of solar. We don't really have onshore wind. I'm a little skeptical of obviously the offshore wind stuff here too. And that was put in place a little bit before the current administration we have here. But you would think an environmentalist would say, okay, the least amount of footprint, reliable energy, and they're the most opposed to nuclear I've ever seen any contingent be opposed to anything. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. I mean, I was crunching some numbers the other day, and you think about, generally speaking, a nuclear reactor puts out about 1,000 megawatts roughly, or 1 gigawatt of power. So that's, one reactor, 1 gigawatt, and most nuclear facilities have at least 2. So you're thinking on a footprint, maybe about 2 gigawatts, but let's just say 1 nuclear reactor, 1 gigawatt. And you can do that on roughly a 1 square mile footprint. The equivalent to that for solar would be 15.6 square miles in order to get the same amount to reach a capacity of 1 gigawatt, which of course it's still you can't compare it, because that nuclear facility is going to be providing you power essentially 100% of the time, whereas that solar is going to be giving you around 25%, maybe less, maybe a little bit more, again, depending on the externality of the sun, and battery storage capabilities. So, I mean, you get 1 square mile of 1 gigawatt, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, or you get 15.6 square miles of 1 gigawatt that's going to work maybe about 25% of the time. So from a reliability standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, I don't understand the argument of why this makes sense. And this is also the issue I have with some of our friends, even in the center right world, who, and of course, there's certainly those on the left who say this too. I mean, Governor Shapiro says that he is a all of the above governor. Your governor in Virginia, Glenn Youngkin, who I love, also likes to say all of the above. We know Senator Cruz of Texas recently has just been celebrated for championing Texas's all of the above approach. And I get it. I mean, as a free market person, I understand the impulse to say we want all of the above. We don't want to be the government to be picking winners and losers. Agree with that 100%. The problem with this all of the above rhetoric is it misses the mark on reliability and affordability. We need reliable and affordable energy, and all energy sources should be able to compete to provide reliable and affordable power. But the problem rhetorically with this all of the above language is it's really just giving ground to the net zero policies. The only reason that rhetoric even became necessary was to try to cozy up to the environmentalist left who are going after, right wingers for even trying to even say that, hey, maybe we shouldn't be getting rid of oil, gas, and coal. So this became this kind of nice little, we want all of the above. It's again, it sounds nice politically, but it really is just giving ground to net zero policies. Why is it even necessary to say? It's necessary because you're trying to be relevant in a space that's just occupied by climate radicals. So really what I think conservatives, those moderates really should be singing is it's not simply all of the above. It's reliable and affordable energy, and let all energy sources compete on very basic metrics of reliability standards. That's not overzealous regulation, and it's not picking winners and losers. It's allowing the marketplace. We know what the grid needs to stay online. Okay, go do it. Keep it. Make sure that the generation that we're choosing maintains or improves the reliability and adequacy of the grid. That's a pretty basic metric. So I think rhetorically, we really need to pull away from blank checks of all of the above and say we need reliable and affordable energy.
I wholeheartedly agree. And you and I are going to explore this more in depth in op-ed format very soon, shortly after this podcast is published, because you're right. It is a concession to net zero to say we may just kick the can down the road maybe by 10 years, or we have a similar decarbonization goal. Not saying the governors do. Youngkin has not said by any means that he supports net zero. I think a lot of Republicans have not similarly jumped on board saying I'm supporting going carbon free. That's not the case. But some people in the center right have, I would say outside of elected office. I think, what was it? Doug Burgum has actually signed on to, right? I think he pushed for net zero in like a conservative fashion. I think that's the only Republican I've officially heard has said that or aligned totally with net zero. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you've heard Burgum take such a stance, but he says with natural gas and some other.
That might be right. I frankly don't know, but that might be right. What I will say is there are conservative ways to have this conversation. I'll talk about what we did in North Carolina back in 2021 in our bill that we did not concede on net zero, but we did concede to the governor's intention to want to lower carbon emissions. So we went with carbon neutrality, not net zero, which is a different thing. But also we said, okay, you have these goals, fine. You can only reach these goals. So the North Carolina law has the metrics of carbon neutrality. There's a 2030 or 2035 deadline now. I forget, and a 2050 goal. Okay, but you can only reach those goals so long as you maintain least cost generation planning, which was already in law in North Carolina. So it was beefed up. It says it has to be done at the least cost to ratepayers. And anything you do to reach those goals cannot jeopardize the reliability and adequacy of the grid. It has to either maintain or improve grid reliability and adequacy. So you can only achieve those goals if you meet those benchmarks. And those benchmarks supersede those goals. So it's and what we're seeing coming online in North Carolina is we're seeing more natural gas or Duke Energy. So it's a vertically integrated monopoly in North Carolina. They're looking to expand their nuclear fleet and looking at SMRs. Great, we should do that. Is it the perfect policy that I would like to see? No. Was it a compromise policy that worked in a bipartisan way to move us in a direction forward that isn't going to push energy scarcity and poverty? Yes. So there are ways to do this. There are ways for those of the center right to work with Democrats and even try to reasonably and responsibly work on policies this way. If we could do that bill over again, I think there are things if we didn't have to make political concessions, I don't think you needed the carbon reduction elements in law. I think by market-driven solutions, going towards grid reliability and towards least cost, the market is going to be incentivized to already lower emissions in a healthy and responsible way that isn't going to raise electric costs or make the grid more vulnerable. And that's what we're seeing really come out of net zero, these net zero goals, you're removing reliable hydrocarbons from the grid. This makes absolutely no sense. We should not be doing that. Again, there are ways to responsibly protect the environment. And really at the end of the day, that's what this all of the above rhetoric is. It's really conceding ground to say, oh yeah, we'll eventually totally decarbonize our grid, but we're not there yet. I mean, that's really what you're saying, and that's why I really think this all of the above rhetoric, all of the above plans is, again, it sounds good on paper. I understand the desire there, but we really need to be pushing reliable and affordable, not just all of the above.
I think tech giants are actually ahead of elected Republicans here, because a lot of them were cheering net zero and the platitudes, but now they've shifted their tune. You notice this with conversations surrounding AI-powered data centers. They're now saying we need reliable baseload power, we need nuclear and natural gas. So they're ahead of the curve of even elected Republicans, which is fascinating to me. I do anticipate there will be a rhetorical shift. I hope you and I can help facilitate this, and a couple others we know in the coalition spaces we work in. I think we will. But I think we will see that because people will see it continue to fail, this net zero kind of framework fail in real time. The IRA is not working. It's basically a giveaway to this administration's friends in the clean energy space. And a lot of these projects are failing in real time. They're not coming online. The people who benefit are just taking the money and running. And then those projects never come online. And it makes no sense to me. Why would you fill the grid why would you mix the grid with both reliable and unreliable sources? I feel like that would overpower the grid, lead to a lot of shocks in the system. It makes no sense from a practical standpoint, even taking away, kind of technical knowledge of it. You don't need to be an electrician or an expert here to know what overpowering the grid would look like. So I think we will see even center-right elected officials move away from that and say reliable baseload power once they become confident or feel comfortable talking about it. And I think they will. Yep. It's just a matter of some encouragement because, every state is different. Some states out west have the need for geothermal. I would love to see more geothermal. It's very similar to fracking technology, but we don't have those same outposts here in that greater quantity like you would find in the Mountain West states, Arizona, California, where geothermal sources and pockets are plentiful. You can see I've seen like people advertise for geothermal in your house if you live closer to the mountains, but they're in smaller pockets. They don't exist in a abundant supply like natural gas reserves or even nuclear. Nuclear is Virginia's second largest electricity source here. And so I totally agree. And that's what I've loved about your guys' plan and you laying out these really concise principles. And I think they don't just apply to Virginia. They can have widespread application all across the country. And I hope lawmakers take a look at that and say, okay, maybe we can fine tune our plan to be like this, reliable, not so much this carve out or this concession to net zero. Is there anything else, Andre, you want to talk about the plan, kind of your thoughts on energy policy going forward? It's really interesting because people are talking about aspects of energy, but it seems to be kind of taking a backseat to the economy, to immigration. But I think it's intertwined with the economy because of inflation. And I think energy is probably a big chunk of all these monthly CPI index figures. And I think since Biden took office, if I recall correctly, seeing on TV recently and also in reports, it's like 30 to 40% increase if you account for gas, electricity, all these different variables relating to energy. It's one of the highest increases of any CPI index metric.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's the lifeblood of our economy, especially in energy producing states, but really everywhere. I mean, it impacts everything that we do. I mean, you hear from farmers and our food producers, and they're saying that the increase in energy costs are obviously increasing the price of food. It's going to increase the price of crops. All of these things, are going to impact inflation. I mean, energy costs and everyone talking about the economy right now, these things are not separate. I mean, obviously, you need energy to produce all of the goods. You need energy to transport the goods. You need the energy in your homes to keep them once you purchase these things and to use them. So yeah, it touches on every part of modern life. So I mean, when we're talking about our economy, we should be thinking first and foremost about what our utility costs are going to be. Because I mean, everyone in the manufacturing industry will tell you that that is their number one line item that they think about is energy, and even a millisecond of disruption in the adequacy of the power and the quality of power that they're getting can raise costs in manufacturing and production. So we really need to be thinking about these things. I mean, some final thoughts I have, not just on our energy, statement of principles and our platform that we put out, the Commonwealth Foundation, which I implore all of your listeners to go and read and look at, and if you work in this advocacy space, please share this and quite frankly, steal it, use it to your advantage. We put this out there to help people make the arguments, make the case for an abundance of energy, for a strong, reliable, and affordable energy future. Please use it. And that's really what I would say is we need an energy abundance. We need more energy. We need it to be reliable. We need it to be affordable. I think we really need to rethink through the arguments that have been made the last several years, especially those from the environmental left. And, the American right can't just say, we're going to get to net zero, but slower. I think we really need to rethink what is the end goal here, and how do we get there, and how do we sustain modern life and bring it into the future. We know there's going to be technological advancements and breakthroughs. And I think what we're seeing right now from solar and wind, they can't compete on an equal playing field with everybody else.
Even
that's
with
why
subsidies.
that's why they need mandates. That's why they need subsidies. If these things were same thing with EVs, if they're so great, the market would incentivize it and people would want it. So you usually don't have to mandate or incentivize things on the way that they're doing. So that should just be clear. But really, it's I think of them kind of as like the CDs of energy policy. At some point, we already know that we're going to get to the iTunes and the Spotify and the cloud computing of everything. So why are we dealing with technology of the past when we know we're going to have the technological innovations of the future? So I think buying and going all in on the technology as we have it now with renewables does not make sense to me. We have the technology of the future in nuclear. We should be unlocking the red tape that prevents nuclear from expanding in a way to make it even more affordable, to make it even more reliable, and change the scales that we do nuclear on to, like small. I think SMR technology is going to be great. We've already made advances technologically on natural gas. The shale boom of how we've been able to do hydraulic fracturing has been incredible. The scrubbing that we've done on emissions. We know how to do this cleaner, safer, and more affordable than anywhere else in the world. And I think the more we unlock that, we should be bolstering that and have more of it rather than less of it. And that includes hydrocarbons. That's going to include nuclear. And I think it's going to also include renewables. But we need to do this responsibly. We need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that maintains grid reliability and also makes energy affordable. And if we do all of that, I think we will have a future in America of energy abundance and not scarcity or poverty. So again, I think it's just going to take some courage amongst lawmakers and people in the policy advocacy space to just speak truth to some of these things and say the way we've thought about these things in the past maybe is not the way we should be thinking about it moving forward.
Excellent analysis. I wholeheartedly agree. And it doesn't make you a Luddite to question solar and wind because, believe it or not, they're actually not new technologies. People have experimented with them before. They failed to work. So people moved to reliable baseload power, coal, oil, and gas, and nuclear. And so it does not make you a Luddite to question things that sound great on paper, but they're not computing well. And we will get advancements in energy, but I think it has to be tweaked to those that are actually reliable, can withstand different pressures in the grid, interruptions, and also actually meet the market demand. André, where could everyone read the report? Where can everyone connect with you? Please dispense the links if you can.
Sure. So they can go to commonwealthfoundation.org. They could see all the energy policy work that we're doing there and more for Pennsylvanians. You can also go to energyvisionpa.com. That's the direct link that'll bring you right to the report. The Commonwealth Foundation is on all of the socials. And if you're looking for me specifically, you can find me on the Commonwealth website. And of course, you can find me on Twitter or X at the Real Béliveau, and I'm on there. And I like to tweet, so I will. You can follow me out there for energy takes and more, as you well know, Gabby.
You have great takes. I enjoy them thoroughly. All links will be included in the show notes. And André, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and I know we'll catch up again in person very soon. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played, and also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day, and please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.